Hi, I'm Bill DeWitt Jr., Chairman and CEO of the St. Louis Cardinals. My family and I are very pleased to help underwrite this great exhibit for the St. Louis Browns. My father started in baseball in 1916 with the St. Louis Cardinals and was a protege of Branch Rickey. He moved over to the Browns in 1930 and had a distinguished career there for many years. In 1944, he was the general manager of the Browns when they won their only pennant, so that was quite a thrill for our family. I have fond memories of the Browns and Sportsman's Park. Probably the two most memorable moments were back in 1947 when Babe Ruth came to town, really not too long before he died. And between games of a doubleheader, I got to go out on the field and meet him. And in a photo that was used pretty extensively, he was showing me how to bat. So that was quite a thrill. And then secondly, when Bill Veeck, after he came to St. Louis, after he purchased the team from my father, who still worked for the Browns, he signed Eddie Gaedel as a pinch hitter to bat one Sunday. And since there was no other uniform that would fit him, Eddie Gaedel being about 4 feet tall, they had to use my uniform. So I got to meet Eddie Gaedel. I got to watch him pinch hit in my uniform, and it's a uniform I still have and have loaned to the Hall of Fame. The Browns are obviously an important part of my family's history, an important part of baseball history here in St. Louis as well as in Major League Baseball. I hope you enjoy walking down Browns memory lane as much as I did. And now here's Bob Costas.
Hi everyone, I'm Bob Costas. As we all know, St. Louis is the best baseball town in America, and you are right now in the heart of Cardinal Nation. But as at least some of you know, St. Louis's Major League history is not confined to the Cardinals. Because for decades and decades, until the midpoint of the 20th century, there was another team in St. Louis. Mostly a losing team, but a team that at one time had a first baseman who hit 400, at one time was the Major League home of one of the greatest and most legendary Negro League stars, at one time had a pitcher who would go on to pitch a World Series perfect game. At one time they were owned by this guy, Bill Veeck, who among other things sent a midget up to pinch hit. They were the St. Louis Browns, the forerunners of the current Baltimore Orioles. And they're part of St. Louis's baseball story too. Here's part of the story of the St. Louis Browns. Although the name St. Louis Browns will forever be associated with futility, that certainly wasn't the plan. The Brownies began play with the optimism befitting a new century and a new league, the American League. Founded in 1901, the AL began without teams in New York or St. Louis. But within a couple of years, the Baltimore franchise had moved to New York, and the Milwaukee Brewers had come to St. Louis. Although Brewers would have certainly been a fitting nickname for a team in St. Louis, and Browns president Ralph Orthwein was a cousin of the Bush family by marriage, the team wound up being called the Browns, a reference to the team that had dominated the American Association in the 1880s, a team the new Browns wanted to kind of conjure up, at least in spirit. Thinking perhaps that even the diamond the old Browns played on might have had some magic, they reopened dilapidated Sportsman's Park on Grand Avenue. In the beginning, the Browns spent freely, luring star players from the Cardinals, who played just 6 blocks away, convincing them to jump leagues. They introduced the first PA announcer, the first electronic scoreboard, and even a rudimentary retractable roof, which was made of canvas tent. In 1909, they rebuilt Sportsman's Park using the then innovative material called steel. The heavy spending paid off, and St. Louis actually was considered an American League town at the beginning of the 20th century. In 1920, the Cardinals convinced the Browns to let them share Sportsman's Park. Meanwhile, Browns GM Branch Rickey had jumped to the Cardinals. The Cards owners invested the money they saved on stadium upkeep into the idea Rickey had originally hatched with the Browns, the idea of a minor league farm system. In the late teens and into the 20s, Browns squads featuring Hall of Fame first baseman George Sisler, a 2-time 400 hitter, were feared around the American League, but they could never quite get to the top of the heap in a talent-rich league that had names like Ruth, Cobb, and Speaker. Meanwhile, in the other Sportsman's Park clubhouse, Branch Rickey's farm system was starting to pay dividends, and the Cardinals were cleaning up on National League competition. In 1926, it was the Cardinals, and not the Browns, who brought St. Louis its first pennant since the 1880s. Through the Depression and beyond, Browns' fortunes remained dim. But that all changed, at least for a short while, as the World War II draft was beginning to wreak havoc on Major League rosters, and the Browns sensed an opportunity. In 1944, the Browns won their first 9 games of the season. Owner Donald Barnes, skipper Luke Sewell, and a GM named Bill DeWitt had assembled a deft wartime mix of grizzled veterans, 4Fs, and weekend-only pitchers who punched a clock at a munitions plant. In late September, the Browns found themselves in second place, with the Yankees coming to town for a season-ending series. The Browns had won 7 of their last 8, but now, could they beat the Yankees, who had won more pennants than they could count, and somehow secure the top rung of the ladder for the first time in Browns history? Only 6,000 showed up for a Friday doubleheader, which the Browns swept. On Saturday, attendance almost tripled as 17,000 saw the Browns shut the Yankees out. On Sunday, attendance would double from that to a standing-room-only crowd of 36,000. The excitement was described in the papers as near delirium. The Yankees jumped ahead 2-0, but the Browns tied it up in the 4th and then took a 2-run lead in the 5th. 2 homers by left fielder Chet Labbs and another by all-star shortstop Vern Stevens did the trick. The crowd howled with every Yankee out from then on as the Browns went on to clinch their first and only pennant. As the fans ran onto the field and mobbed their victorious Brownies, the irony set in. The Browns would have to share the World Series with their tenants, the Cardinals. It would be a streetcar St. Louis World Series. But who would the city root for? Which team would have the home field advantage, with both playing in their home park? In icy St. Louis fall weather, the series began. Stan Musial noticed that more fans seemed to be rooting for the underdog Brownies than his Cardinals. After jumping out to a 2-1 series lead, the Browns' bats froze completely, and they lost the World Championship to their rivals 4-2. In 1945, with the Browns trying to repeat, another oddity. Up from the minors came an outfielder who had hit .333 in the minor leagues. His name was Pete Gray. He had lost an arm at age 6 when he slipped under a train. The Browns fell behind early in the season as Gray struggled to hit major league pitching. They did get to within 3.5 back by Labor Day, but they could finish no better than 3rd. After the war, the Browns resumed their role as also-rans. Still, the lean Browns farm system of the post-war period did manage to churn out some talent that proved attractive to other clubs, producing future stars with names like Ned Garver, Bob Turley, Don Larson, Ryan Duran, Tito Francona, and Dale Long. Tommy Lasorda spent his first Major League spring training with the Browns. Of these Brownie Farm products, 2 won Rookie of the Year titles: hometown home run hero Roy Sievers and Clint Courtney. And then into the fray stepped Bill Veeck, a casually dressed, blunt talker who was extremely energetic despite being a 5-pack-a-day smoker who eventually would undergo 36 operations on a leg that would have to be amputated. He had fathered 9 children, 6 of them after age 47. And my friends, if that is not an indication of vitality, I ask you, what is? Upon buying the Browns in 1951, Veeck announced in high noon fashion that St. Louis was just not big enough for 2 baseball teams and that he would run the Cardinals out of town. The Cardinals were, of course, at the time more popular, more successful, and better funded than the Browns. But Veeck and his new wife and ex-Ice Capades promoter were determined. He moved his family into an apartment beneath Sportsman's Park. He worked 20-hour days and would speak at a community group every night the Browns didn't have a game in an attempt to resell the Browns to St. Louis. And in his downtime, what there was of it, he'd dream up wacky promotions to make the ballpark more fun, as he put it, like Grandstand Manager's Night, where the fans used placards to make strategic decisions in place of the manager. His ultimate gimmick came in 1951, when, on the pretext of celebrating the 50th anniversary of the American League, he had a 3-foot-7-inch man named Eddie Goodell pop out of a giant birthday cake and then proceed to take a spot in the lineup as a pinch hitter. Wearing elf-like shoes and 1/8 as his uniform number, Goodell walked on 4 straight pitches, was pulled for a pinch runner, and rode off into history. Affable right-hander Ned Garver became a crowd favorite that year, pulling off the feat of winning 20 games for a Browns team that lost 100. Veck's showmanship worked for a while. Browns' attendance for 1952 increased dramatically to its highest level since 1908. Even play on the field improved as they upped their record from 51 by 12 games and pulled out of last place. And then, in early 1952, Veck almost got the kind of break he was looking for. Cardinals owner Fred Sy was indicted for tax evasion. It became apparent that Sy would have to sell the team. But for a while, no credible St. Louis-based buyer appeared. Rumors swirled that the desperate Sy would sell the team to Houston interests. It looked like Veck might actually pull it off and run the Cardinals out of town. But when Sy took less money to keep the team in St. Louis, Veck knew he couldn't compete with the new owner, Anheuser-Busch. He eventually sold the team to Baltimore interests at the end of the '53 season. The Baltimore owners didn't keep any of Veck's promotions. They retired the whimsical Elf Louis from the jerseys. They released Satchel Paige, sold his bullpen rocking chair, and changed the name from Browns to Orioles. The Braves, the Giants, the Dodgers, and the A's also moved during the 1950s and yet kept their historic names in their new cities. But the name Browns will forever be owned by St. Louisans and associated with losing, yes, but also with the baseball of a simpler era.